Okay, peace. This is Just Be Real coming to you live once again. This is part 2 on the origin of the AIDS virus. Now, we're going to continue where I left off at. We're going to check this out. They even talk about Nation Islam.
Something evil. Bill Gates, the Microsoft billionaire, apparently wants to use vaccines to help reduce the world's population by billions over the next decades, supposedly in order to limit carbon dioxide emissions. The bulk of this depopulation is to occur in the world of black and brown people, so-called third world. He's spending huge amount of his money to make this happen. In 2017, he gave this man $32.6 million for HIV vaccine research. The most ravaged place on earth by AIDS and HIV is Africa. But there is a horrific irony. Dr. David Montefiore, who is leading the Gates HIV vaccine initiative, it appears, made a remarkable discovery in 1990 that the medical establishment and AIDS research establishment are almost completely silent about today, including him, which I suspect is the reason for his phenomenal career advancement. I suspect 9 years after HIV and AIDS first showed up as a white gay male disease in California and New York in the early 80s, Dr. Montefiore demonstrated in his Vanderbilt University laboratory that melanin, I hope you can read that melanin possessed the unique biological property to block HIV infection in unaffected cells. Did you hear what I said? Did you read that? Melanin blocked. Melanin blocked infection by cell-free viruses and interfered with HIV-induced effects. This 1990. Water-soluble melanin can completely or partially protect human lymphocytes from infection by cell-free AIDS virus. In 1990, it was discovered that melanin actually is protective against the existing HIV virus at the time. But you say, and rightly so, HIV is ravaging and AIDS is ravaging Africa today. How did that happen? How did it happen? Because it was the initial HIV-1 and initial HIV-2 strains that they produced in the laboratory, but they discovered that melanin made black people resistant to those strains, so they created new strains on the basis of his discovery. But this is what is even more insidious. Slide, please. After discovery that melanin was protective against HIV. Slide, please. He patented. Oh, did I lose y'all? insoluble.
Okay, let me pause it here. Now let's go back to this book. Emerging viruses, AIDS and Ebola, nature, accident, or intentional. And there was something else I came about in this book. Let's see here. This is sick. This is sick. Give me 1 second. Stay right there. Okay. Oh man, I done messed up. Okay, let me go back. Yeah, these people are crazy. They trying to wipe black folks out. And they doing it. They're doing it. Let's go back to this man's site. And it says, ignorance is bliss or the suicide. It says, we all know it is easier for a king to have a lie believed than a beggar to spread the truth. Well, we are being spreaded with the truth about AIDS. Unfortunately, it isn't pretty. But the fact is, you are not being told the truth by the government and so-called AIDS experts. The media, for reasons of their own, will not present information contradicting the official propaganda. So you can choose to go along with the same people who gave us brain cancer, SV40 virus, as a result of their contaminated polio vaccines in the early 1960s, a polio-like disease from their contaminated swine flu vaccine in the 1970s, and AIDS from their smallpox and hepatitis B vaccines. All these vaccines, all these viruses are made by the government. And they're trying to wipe your ass out, especially you niggas. And you people vote for these fuckers? You vote for these people? You some dumbasses. Let's go back. Go back here.
Same basic appearance is destructive. It was one of the reasons that they had trouble getting enough of the virus, because suppose this was a tissue culture, every time they put in the AIDS virus, what would happen was they'd come back in a few days and the tissue culture would be dead. Basically, there would be left just debris with very little virus, no living cells. That is basically what happens in human beings, because in humans, we are nothing more than walking tissue cultures. So
I broke down the body already. If you want to know what God is, break your body down.
suppose we have a human being here. He gets infected with the AIDS virus, and what happens? Eventually, the AIDS virus wipes out his T4 lymphocytes, destroys his thymus most probably, and as a result, relieves him immune suppressed, immune compromised, and susceptible to the development of infections such as pneumocystis carinii pneumonia or the arisal of cancers such as Kaposi sarcoma. These have been the basic hallmarks of the AIDS virus. But again, let's look at the overall picture. And the overall picture is that suddenly in humans, we have an explosion of disease. Not just AIDS, but other retroviruses. HTLV1, a T-cell leukemia virus, HTLV2, HTLV3, HTLV4, which is a new, recently recognized AIDS virus, also known as HIV2, HTLV5, which is the cause of mycosis fungoides, and HTLV1 lookalike, which looks like this. I call it one lookalike. Now, even looking at, say, let's throw AIDS out for a minute, you have to ask yourself, where did all these other viruses come from? And my explanation as to where these other things have come from, along with the AIDS virus, is the following. If you look at animals, particularly cattle and sheep, you'll discover an interesting phenomenon.
So he said cattle and sheep. Let's go to cattle and sheep. You got cattles or cows. Cow disease. Okay. And it says, according to the Wikipedia, bovine spongiform BSE, more commonly known as mad-cow disease, or whatever, right? It's called the BSE. All right. And then you have here something else. You got what? The sheep disease. And it says here that let's see, sheep disease is your sheep, and you got pneumonia, lymphadenitis. Let's see. Okay. I'm trying to wake you niggas up. I'm trying to put you on game. But you stuck in that goddamn Bible. So we the chosen people. Fuck that, man. We ain't got time for that shit. We got bigger problems. Our family's being wiped out. God ain't came yet to save us. He ain't gonna come. Scabies, parasite diseases. And white folks be having sex with these animals. Look it up on YouTube, on the websites, the porn websites.
Cattle, there's a virus known as bovine leukemia virus, which has the exact same morphology, which means shape, the exact same relative molecular weight, the same magnesium dependency, and the ability to produce B and T cell leukemia.
So you said bovine leukemia. Bovine leukemia. Let's see. So you got bovine leukemia. It's called BLV. Bovine. We got the bovine leukemia virus. Bovine leukemia virus. Bovine BLV is a retrovirus which causes enzootic bovine leukosis in cattle. Cattle are cows. HTLV1, BLV may integrate into genomic DNA of B lymphocytes as a DNA intermediate, the provirus. Okay? Now, let's keep on going.
Cattle and is proliferative in tissue culture. If you look at bovine syncytial virus, you'll find another virus of cattle, which has the same shape, the same magnesium dependency, the same basic appearance, and produces hairy cell leukemia in cattle. If you look back, you can discover a virus known as bovine visnavirus, which has the same appearance as AIDS, the same molecular weight.
Bovine visnavirus. What is that? Bovine visnavirus. Bovine Visna. Here it is. Bovine viral diarrhea virus. Let's see what this is. Let's see what this shit is. These are all man. This is all this shit is man-made. Nothing divinely inspired, nothing magical or spiritually, none of that shit is all man-made.
The same magnesium dependency, and in 1974, either 1 or 3 here, bovine leukemia or bovine visnovirus, was producing pneumocystis carinii pneumonia in chimpanzees. And if that isn't AIDS, I don't know what it is. Now we have HTLV4, which may represent a recombination between Visna and HTLV2, or bovine syncytial virus here, which is a new AIDS virus, growing, just identified, which has this appearance. We have HTLV5, which I'm not sure in animals what it is, and we have HTLV1 look-alike.
You'll recall that Dr. Strecker has shown us that the AIDS virus selects and destroys T4 cells. These are the cells in our bodies that protect us against the development of cancers. Now, persons infected with the AIDS virus have T4 cell destruction and subsequent development of specific types of cancer. These include Kaposi sarcoma and pneumocystic carinii pneumonia, which are fatal. Looking at the overall virus picture in a general way, Dr. Strecker has pointed out that there are several other deadly retroviruses, besides the actual AIDS virus, which are infecting humans and causing cancers, including cancer of the blood, leukemia. Dr. Strecker makes an interesting and startling correlation. These human cancer-causing retroviruses, including AIDS, all have striking similarities to animal viruses, but not from the green monkey, from cattle and sheep, known as bovine and Visna viruses. Now, the implications of these similarities between human and animal viruses is disturbing. How did animal viruses get into humans? As we shall see, this subject begins to reveal the true origins of the AIDS virus.
Now, why do I bring up the question of cattle viruses and sheep viruses when everybody says that these viruses came from monkeys? I say that for the following reason. If you look at the genes of the AIDS virus, the genes of the AIDS virus don't look like monkeys. The genes of the AIDS virus, in every paper published to date, look like the following: bovine leukemia virus of cattle or Visna virus of sheep.
See that?
Now, these are retroviruses of animals, and these viruses are known to cause brain rot in sheep and to cause leukemia of cattle. So, is it possible, it was my question, is it possible to cross these two viruses and make AIDS? Now, of course, if you go down and ask your local AIDS expert, is that possible? Most of them will probably lie and tell you, no, that's not possible, that's just nonsense. But the truth of the matter is that AIDS viruses, in a sense, are much like humans, in that if you have bovine leukemia virus on one hand and Visna virus on the other hand, and you simultaneously infect a human tissue culture, what comes out of that infection is not only the original parents, bovine leukemia virus and Visna virus, but what comes out of that is every possible recombinant that will grow. In fact, not only that, also comes out of the ones that won't grow, which you can't identify because some of them down here are recombinants that come out, but they won't reproduce. They're called, in fact, in retrovirology, those are called incompetent. They're not capable of reproduction. You might call them impotent. They can't reproduce. So, we get out not only the competent, but the impotent. So, in fact, these viruses do, in a sense, not only reproduce themselves, but they make babies, which are different than the parental strains. It's just like each of us. Each of us is a recombination of our fathers and our mothers. If you say, well, we look at the AIDS virus, and we say, well, it's only 50% identical to Visna, and it's only 50% identical to bovine leukemia. And they say that's, quote, distally related. It's like saying I'm distally related to my mother or my father because I only contain 50% of their genes. Of course, that's nonsense. the fact is that containing 50% of the genes of the virus, you could be the direct descendant of the parents. It's the same as each of us. Each of us is a direct descendant of our parents, and we contain 50% of our mother's genes and 50% of our father's genes. Now, we say that this virus was predicted. Now, how can we say that? We can say that because if you review the literature as far back as 1966, writing in Lancet, McFarland Burnett said the following.
The human implications of what is going on in the sophisticated universe of tissue culture cells, bacteria, and the viruses are at best dubious, at most, frankly terrifying. Later, in concluding an article addressing the bad aspects of molecular biology, the author states, "This series of articles is designed, I believe, to persuade readers to think again about some current dogmas that have grown up in medicine, and not necessarily to offer alternative approaches. These dogmas could be referring to those regarding AIDS, many of which are not true. Regardless of your beliefs in the origin of man, being that of an evolutionist or creationist, the author raises an alarming point about the manipulation of mankind through genetic engineering. Medicine must make
There's that word, genetic engineering.
use of all the sciences, but it must also recognize the limitations that the process of evolution and the nature of man places on their utilization. It is a hard thing for an experimental scientist to accept, but it is becoming all too evident that there are dangers in knowing what we should not know."
So what is he saying there? He's saying that we're fooling around with the very nature of life, and that when you're doing that, you may have some problems. If you're a creationist and you believe that God created the universe, the answer would be, what makes you think that you can make it better? If you're an evolutionist and you believe that man evolved over thousands of years and all life evolved, then what makes you think that you can make it better in a few years compared to what has taken, say, hundreds of thousands of years to occur? Back to the prediction. If we address what J. Clemenson said...
J. Clemenson from the Danish Cancer Registry, in addressing an international assembly of leukemia experts, said, "We are in fact establishing conditions for a possible pandemic of an oncogenic virus varied on the scale of influenza of 1918.
Now, what is she saying there? She's saying that what's going to happen in the near future, and she said this in 73, is that someday you're going to be walking down the street, and what drops on you isn't going to be influenza, it's going to be leukemia or cancer. She says,
It is possible to visualize the mutation of a virus into a variety of high contagiosity to man, resulting in a...
Let's stop right there. Let's go back to the movie Outbreak. Outbreak. And what is the plot? What is the plot of this movie? They put the shit right in your damn face. I said in 67 during the Kisangani mutinies, a virus called Mutamba, which causes a deadly fever, is discovered in the African jungle. Okay. Let's go back here. Right? It says a film focuses on an outbreak of a fictional Ebola-like virus. How was the Ebola made? In a laboratory. And where did the Ebola virus go? Get spread to? Africa. Let's click on Ebola. They're telling you clear as day. Let's see, Ebola. You got the Ebola virus. Right? The Ebola virus. Okay? And it says here that and two nurses standing there, Mazinga and Sinka, a nurse with Ebola virus disease, in the 1976 outbreak in Zaire. She died a few days later. So this Ebola virus broke out in 1976. In 76, the outbreak. They've been had this shit weaponized. It's a weapon. Let's keep on going.
Pandemic of neoplastic disease before we could even develop a vaccine.
What is she saying here? She's saying that what's going to happen, and she says it here, is because of serial passage of viruses in tissue culture and adaptation to man, that you will develop a new virus which will infect man, give him cancer before you have the chance to develop a vaccine against that. And my question is, isn't that just exactly what has happened with the AIDS pandemic? She closes by saying, basically, we who are about to die salute you. And I'm not quite sure what that means, but we can each draw our own conclusions. Now, how could you adapt a virus, say bovine virus, if you had it in hand to grow in human beings? This is actually the crux of the AIDS issue. The NIH would have us believe, and other so-called AIDS experts, that the virus jumped species from chimpanzees in Africa to humans by biting someone on the butt, and then bam, we got AIDS all over Africa. Now, of course, they tell us, don't they, that you can't transfer this virus by biting or by saliva, yet they would have us believe that this monkey transferred it by saliva, and the fact of the matter is that the AIDS virus reportedly won't grow in African green monkeys. It doesn't cause disease there, and the genes of the AIDS virus don't look like monkeys. They look like the disease affecting cattle and sheep. So, if we had a virus named bovine visna in our laboratory, how could we adapt it, accidentally or on purpose, to grow in humans? Now, that was addressed in a series of very interesting experiments published by Stuart Aronson of the National Institute of Health in 1971. The first article was called Common Alterations of RNA Tumor Viruses, and what he did...
Look up so here's that word RNA. RNA. Ebola virus. And it says diagnostic finding the virus viral, RNA, or antibodies in blood. See that? Even the Simpsons cartoon talk about Ebola virus. Keep on going.
He grew a mouse virus, an RNA retrovirus of mice, in human tissue. And what happened was that mouse virus adapted to human tissue. It became human-like in a sense, and it would now only grow in human tissue. It would no longer grow in a mouse. Now that was expanded in 1972 or so in a paper published by Leon Domchowski and Kosho Maruyama from Texas Medicine, 1973, in an article entitled Cross-Species Transmission of Mammalian, we're mammals, RNA Tumor Viruses. And what they did in this paper was to show that you could take a species such as, say, cattle or sheep, and serially passage a virus, specifically an RNA retrovirus, in tissue cultures, and adapt that virus to grow in another species, like man. So, if the basic question is cross-species transmission of these viruses, you say, how did cross-species transmission occur? Did it occur by some monkey biting somebody on the butt in Africa and then AIDS all over Africa? Or was it by serial adaptation of the virus to humans by growth in human tissue culture? Now, you say the virus is requested. How can we say this virus was requested? Surely nobody would request the AIDS virus. Yet, when you address Bulletin of the World Health Organization, published in 1972, it says specifically the following.
an attempt should be made to ascertain whether viruses can in fact exert selective effects on the immune function by depressing 7S versus 19S antibody or by affecting T cell as opposed to B cell function. The possibility should be looked into that the immune response to the virus may itself be impaired if the effective viruses damage more or less selectively the cells responding to the viral antigens.
Now, what does that say? That says, let's make a virus that selectively inhibits the T cell system of man. And of course, what is that virus? That virus is AIDS. So, is it a mere coincidence that we now have a pandemic of a T cell destroying virus, which was in a sense predicted, and here requested, growing in Africa and the United States? Now, this question was addressed partially in an article written Monday, May 11th, 1987.
You niggas, I don't know what it's gonna take for you all to wake the hell up. Let's go back here. Even in this book here, they mention Henrietta Lacks. Okay. I'm showing you here. They're telling you clear as day that the AIDS virus was targeted for black African genocide. Let's go back here. The AIDS virus was created by the United States government at Fort Detrick in Maryland, a biological warfare laboratory in building number 550 in the P4 lab and things like that, right? They're telling you. AIDS virus as a political ethnic weapon to be used mainly against blacks. Fettler, 1989. And also they did it on the U.S. Tuskegee Experiment. They did it on them niggas. Pump their ass with what is that? Let me see. What did they get them dudes on? The U.S. Tuskegee Experiment, another germane companion analysis in the Tuskegee Experiment that was conducted by the U.S. government on innocent and unsuspecting African-American males from 1932 to 1937. In 1932, the United States Public Health Service solicited and recruited about 400 African-American males as guinea pigs in, quote, one of the most notorious medical experiments, Fettler, 1989, on the study of the effects of syphilis in Macomb County, Alabama. Now, the same man, Fettler, in 1989, said this up here. He said that, what is it? He said it up here. AIDS is the biological warfare. Who they going to war with? Niggas. Let me see. I'm going to post all these links in my description box. You can read this on your own. You can watch the video for free. Alright, let's go back to the Tuskegee Experiment if I run out of time. So it says that these subjects never gave informed consent for their participation in the study. Now this sounds like what happened with Henrietta Lacks. This sounds like what happened with Henrietta Lacks. Her cell line. immortalized cell line. Right? They took this woman's cells without her permission. Okay? And she was tested for syphilis, and it came back negative. Okay? Medical scientific research, dividing HeLa cell line, HeLa cells. And they found that her cells were, it says, additionally, Chester M. Southam, a leading virologist, injected HeLa cells into cancer patients, prison inmates, and healthy individuals in order to observe whether cancer could be transmitted, as well as to examine if one could become immune to cancer by developing an acquired immune system. HeLa cells were in high demand and put into mass production. They were mailed to scientists around the globe for research into cancer, AIDS, the effect of radiation and toxic substances, gene mapping, and countless other scientific pursuits. HeLa cells were the first human cells successfully cloned in 1955 and have since been used to test human sensitivity to tape, glue, cosmetic, and other products. Since the 1950s, scientists have grown as much as 50 million metric tons of its cells, and there are almost 11,000 patents involving HeLa cells. Let's go back up here. So it says that, let's see. The black men were never told they had syphilis, nor were they told that the disease could endanger their families. They were told they were receiving free treatment for bad blood. And even when a penicillin treatment cure for syphilis became available in the 1940s, the men in the Tuskegee syphilis experiment were not allowed to receive the antibiotic. By U.S. government decree, other doctors in the Macomb County were forbidden to treat any of the men in the study. It says the U.S. government has stated that the purpose of the study was to record the destructive effects of untreated syphilis and to follow closely the medical progress of the group until each man died. However, according to Martin P. Levine, 1987, quote, the experiment was easily justified by physicians and scientists because it was widely believed that black racial inferiority made them a notoriously syphilis-soaked race. These physicians and scientists were convinced that, quote, the smaller brains of these black men lacked mechanisms for controlling sex desire, causing them to be highly promiscuous. They matured early and consequently were more sexually active. And the black man's enormous penis with its long foreskin was prone to venereal infections. These physiological differences meant that disease must affect the races differently. In summary, the U.S. government-sponsored Tuskegee Experiment represented germ biological warfare committed on its own citizens for 40 years. It must be noted, however, that in 1974, a U.S. civil rights attorney won a $10 million settlement for the government for the Tuskegee victims and their heirs. Another $2.1 million payment was received in 1976. On May 16, 1997, President Clinton issued an official public apology on behalf of the U.S. government to the victims of the Tuskegee Experiment. He says, quote, the United States government did something that was wrong, deeply, profoundly morally wrong. It was an outrage to our committee to integrity and equality for all our citizens. What was done cannot be undone, but we can end the silence. We can stop turning our heads away. We can look at you in the eye and finally say on behalf of the American people, what the United States government did was shameful, and I'm sorry. The White House. You keep that goddamn apology. You keep that shit. Goddamn shame.
And in that article, in the front page of the London Times, which addressed the question of, was there an association between the WHO vaccine programs in Africa and the outbreak of AIDS? Their conclusion was the following, that there was an association. Well, the story goes like this. Supposedly somebody had been hired by the WHO to investigate whether or not the WHO vaccine programs in Africa, the WHO meaning the World Health Organization, which were the WHO vaccine programs which were responsible for eradication of smallpox in Africa, may have been a contributing factor to the spread of AIDS in Africa. Evidently, a researcher who has remained anonymous, is afraid to reveal his name, was hired by the World Health Organization to investigate that study. He did a study over a year or two. He wrote a report. He submitted it to the World Health Organization. The WHO was paid, and that was the end of it. A year or so later, he walks in to the London Times and throws the report on Pierce Wright's desk, who is the science writer at the London Times, and said, if you really want to know what's going on with AIDS in Africa, here's the answer. That article was the impetus for the printing of this story, which said there's a correspondence between the WHO's program in Africa and the outbreak of AIDS. As far as we know, this has never been discussed or addressed in this country. And I find that particularly interesting as to why it's never been addressed in the United States for the following reason. A quote in that article on Monday, May 11th was from Dr. Robert Gallo, who is the reported co-discoverer of the AIDS virus, who said that this was an interesting and important hypothesis. An interesting and important hypothesis. Well, if it's interesting and important, how come nobody's addressing it? Obviously, in a sense, the answer to that might be, if you made AIDS, would you tell anybody? Of course not.
Dr. Robert Gallo, let's see who this nigga is, who this white person is. I need a white man. Dr. Robert Gallo. Who is this dude? Robert Gallo. Robert Gallo, this white man, is an American biomedical researcher. He is best known for his role in the discovery of the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, as the infectious agent responsible for acquired immune deficiency syndrome, AIDS, and in the development of the HIV blood test. Okay, he's a white man. This is all set up, man. Retroviruses, this is all set up. And you know, Wikipedia is not going to give you the truth. They got the cure for it, but you ain't going to get it. They want your ass wiped out. You black people, you niggas. You Negroes, this ain't got shit to do with no curses and Deuteronomy. This is bullshit. But it's all good. I'm about to post this in my description box, a link. You can read this stuff on your own. You know what I'm saying? Let's go back here and close out some of these windows.
Africa. And now he's going to tell you how this AIDS infection could have occurred. Because now you're going to get the facts.
Now, how could this virus have been, say, inoculated by the WHO in Africa? There are two ways. Obviously,
the WHO is the World Health Organization. That's what the WHO stands for. These are white folks. Let's type in the world. Let's see who this World Health Organization is. World Health Organization. Let's see who the hell this is. Okay. Let's go on images. Let's see. Okay, so there's nothing, no pictures is popping up with this World Health Organization. When you click on this, you get shit like this. Let's see. This is your so-called World Health Organization. Alright? Let's see what else we got. I don't even know who the hell these people are. It's like Chinese folks to me. Like a Chinese woman. To me, inside the World Health Organization, let's see, what else you got? I'm trying to wake you niggas up. It's up to you.
If it was intentional, that is the first way. Intentional, and people say, well, that's absurd. And I say, no, that's not absurd because of the following reason. Beginning in the early 30s or 40s in this country, in Tuskegee, Alabama, there was a study undertaken by the United States Public Health Service which enlisted black men who were infected with syphilis.
Infected?
Syphilis, omega syphilis. And those black men were serially followed over many years. The important part of that study was that they were also followed after penicillin became available, and most of them were specifically prevented from being treated with penicillin, which led to the infection of their wives and the development of congenitally infected syphilitic black children in the Tuskegee, Alabama experiment. Now that is documented in a book by James Jones entitled Bad Blood. For anybody who'd like to review the intentional infliction of disease upon American citizens, you can address yourself to this book, Bad Blood by James Jones. Furthermore, between 1959 and approximately 1970, there were over 300 biological experiments conducted on United States citizens, unknowns to them, such as documented in a book called A Higher Form of Killing by Paxman and Harris, which documents all of the biological warfare history of the United States that's known more or less in book form. But to say that this government or other governments are not capable of doing these kinds of experiments is to not face reality. So obviously if it was intentionally induced, then there could be a reason to see.
I'm going to post this in my description box, man. I gotta talk more about this. I have not even read this book yet. I've only read it online, but I have not read it. I have not read it in its entirety. And there's too much fucking evidence in this book, too much proof. Some of this shit I already knew about. This is sad, man. This is sad. Cold War, biological weapon, and world health. They break all this shit down. So your hepatitis B virus, syphilis, cancer, all that stuff is man-made. Is AIDS man-made? AIDS is a man-made disease. AIDS is not a homosexual disease. AIDS is not a venereal disease. AIDS can be carried by mosquitoes. In this video, if you watch it, he will tell you. thousands are already dead. The number of AIDS-infected people is doubling approximately every 12 months, and in some areas even sooner. With 23 million Americans carrying the virus, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see how long we have here in the U.S., Africa. In the U.S., Africa has conservatively 75 million infected. Some estimates double that. Brazil, as a country, is in serious jeopardy because all through the 1970s, they were buying their blood supply from Africa. On top of that, the World Health Organization conducted a large-scale smallpox vaccination program there in the 1970s. Southern Japan had at least 30% infected with the HTLV1, the leukemia-causing virus, although you would never hear about that on TV. Russia is now reporting AIDS as a problem. Cuba has already set up concentration camps for the AIDS infected, and they are full. You won't see it on TV either. Haiti, of course, is ravaged by AIDS. More than 20% of the people are infected and getting worse every day. And so it goes. Virtually every nation on earth, with few exceptions, Iran is one, is reporting a growing problem. It's on every continent, every subcontinent, and every island chain, Atlantic and Pacific. So why won't the media or the government tell you these things? It isn't, it says, is it too controversial for you to handle? This is sad. This is ridiculous. So they're telling you here. It says, so you can choose to go along with the same people who gave you brain cancer, SV40 virus, as a result of the contaminated polio vaccines in the early 1960s, a polio-like disease from their contaminated swine flu vaccine in the 1970s, and AIDS from the smallpox and hepatitis B vaccines. With that being said, peace. I may come back and make a part 3. Peace.